Just a small town girl living in a line.
Los Angeles was breathing through the haze of rain and cigarette smoke. Inside a small rehearsal room, 5 men sat in silence, tired, broke, and uncertain. 3 albums behind them, no hits ahead. Columbia Records had said it plainly: evolve or disappear. They were good, maybe too good. But skill doesn't sell records, emotion does. And that was the one thing they hadn't found. Then, a stranger walked in. He wasn't supposed to be there. He had no invitation, no promise, no spotlight waiting. He just stepped up to the mic, closed his eyes, and sang. 30 seconds later, the air changed. Every doubt in the room fell quiet. The voice wasn't just sound, it was salvation. It carried pain, hope, and something the band had forgotten: belief. That night, a band on the edge of extinction was reborn. And soon, the world would hear a song that turned heartbreak into faith, a melody that refused to die. Stay until the end. You'll understand why this song still breathes, decades after the lights first faded. Long before the anthem, before the lights and the roar of arenas, there was just a man and a payphone in Los Angeles. Jonathan Cain stood under a flickering street lamp, broke and almost defeated. He called his father back home in Chicago, voice trembling with exhaustion. "Dad," he said, "maybe it's time to come back. I've tried everything. The dream isn't working." For a moment, there was only static on the line. Then, a soft voice replied, steady, almost like a prayer. "Don't stop believing." 4 words. That's all. But in those words lived a lifetime of faith, and the seed of something eternal. Cain wrote them down in his notebook that night, not as poetry, not as hope, but as survival. Years later, when fate brought him into Journey, that line returned to him. One evening, he sat beside Steve Perry at the piano, searching for something real. No formulas, no expectations, just the truth. Cain opened his notebook, showed the phrase, and waited. Perry read it and smiled, almost like he'd been waiting for it all along. "That's it," he said softly. "That's what people need to hear." The room filled with a kind of quiet magic. Cain's fingers found the keys. Perry's voice rose above them, fragile yet defiant. They weren't writing a hit. They were building a lifeline. Every note sounded like a confession. Every lyric like a hand reaching through the dark. It wasn't about fame anymore. It was about finding a reason to keep going, for themselves and for anyone who'd ever wanted to quit. Because sometimes, the greatest songs aren't written for the world. They're written to save the people who wrote them. Before Don't Stop Believin', Journey had already lived through years of quiet rejection. They weren't the kind of band executives could control, and that made them dangerous. Too complex for radio, too honest for image-driven rock. They didn't fit the system. And the system doesn't forgive what it can't predict. Columbia Records wanted an easy hit, a catchy chorus, a safe rhythm, something that could sell. But Perry and Cain were after something else: truth. Late nights in the studio turned into emotional battlegrounds. Producers argued about structure. The label complained about length. "This isn't commercial enough," they said. Yet the band refused to trim what mattered most: feeling. When Steve Perry sang, it wasn't rebellion in the loud sense. It was quiet defiance, a voice daring to sound human in a world of noise. He believed vulnerability could be louder than power, and emotion could break harder than guitars. While other bands chased trends, Journey chased sincerity. They poured heartbreak into melody, loneliness into rhythm, and called it rock. Some mocked them for being soft, but what could be softer or stronger than hope that refuses to die? Every line of Don't Stop Believin' was a rebellion against cynicism. It said, "You can break bodies, but not belief." It said, "Even in silence we keep singing." In that choice, to stay authentic when it was easier to surrender, Journey became something greater than a band. They became a reminder that rebellion doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply sings and keeps singing, no matter who tells it to stop. The first time Don't Stop Believin' played on the radio, it wasn't planned. A DJ, moved by instinct more than strategy, decided to spin it again and again. By the third time, the phone lines lit up. Strangers calling, begging, "Play it one more time." Something had shifted. People didn't just listen. They felt seen. A small-town girl, a city boy, two souls on a midnight train. It wasn't fiction. It was everyone. The song spread like light through a tunnel, finding its way into car radios, cafes, late-night drives. There was no grand marketing plan, no viral push, only word of heart. Because when truth resonates, it doesn't need to shout. By the summer of 1981, Escape became a phenomenon. 9 times platinum. Audiences filling arenas not just to hear music, but to remember something in themselves. They sang every word back to Perry, thousands of voices merging into one collective heartbeat. For once, the industry couldn't explain it. It wasn't about production or image. It was about connection, raw, imperfect, human. When the final chorus hit, Perry didn't need to tell them what it meant. He just let the crowd sing it for him. In that sea of faces, something eternal had been born. A truth that would outlive charts, trends, even the band itself. Because real impact isn't measured in fame or fortune. It's in the moment when strangers sing the same line and suddenly, the world feels a little less alone. And that's when Journey stopped being a band and became a feeling. Years passed. The world changed. Neon lights dimmed, haircuts faded, and the echoes of the 1980s grew quiet. But one song refused to die. Steve Perry had walked away, worn down by the endless miles, by fame's invisible weight, and by the quiet heartbreak of watching his mother fade. The band moved on, but every new singer carried his ghost in their throat. Because how do you replace a voice that had become a memory? Then came 2007. The final scene of The Sopranos, a family in a diner, a jukebox hum, and then those 4 piano notes. Just a small-town girl. The world froze mid-breath. Millions of viewers didn't just watch a finale, they felt a resurrection. Suddenly, Don't Stop Believin' wasn't just a relic, it was a pulse again. 3 years later, Glee gave it to another generation, teenagers who weren't even alive when it was written, yet somehow knew every word. By 2012, it had sold over 18 million copies. Forbes called it the greatest song of all time, not because of numbers, but because of endurance. A song that had outlived its era, its band, even its own meaning. And in 2017, when Journey was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Steve Perry stood beside his old bandmates. He didn't sing. He didn't need to. The standing ovation said everything. Because some songs don't need a stage to live. They live in people, in memories, in moments, in the spaces between what was lost and what survived. Don't Stop Believin' had become more than music. It had become proof that faith, once sung, never really fades. Maybe you've heard this song 1,000 times. In your car, at a wedding, on a night when you needed strength but didn't know how to ask for it. And yet, every time it plays, it feels new. Because Don't Stop Believin' was never just about a band. It was about us. About every small town dreamer, every city soul still chasing light. It was a reminder that even when the world grows quiet, hope can still hum softly in the background. What do you hear when that piano begins? Is it nostalgia? Or is it proof that faith once found never really disappears? If stories like this remind you why music still matters, stay close. There are more echoes to explore, more voices worth remembering. We tell these stories not to mourn the past, but to keep it alive. One heartbeat, one song, one moment at a time. Because legends never fade. They just wait for someone to listen again. And if this story stirred something quiet inside you, hold it close. Every week we travel back to the songs that shaped us, to the voices that refused to die, to the memories that remind us who we are beneath the noise. Let's keep that light alive, one story, one song, one heartbeat at a time. Because somewhere out there, another melody is waiting to be remembered, and maybe it's yours.